Welcome to the Growth Through Adversity podcast, where men are forged, not coddled. Here we dive deep into the path of true transformation in pursuit of physical, mental, spiritual, and temporal growth. We talk training, nutrition, business, mindset, and spirituality. We embrace strength and we loathe ease. We reject weakness in every form and cultivate power, the will to power itself. This is the rebirth of modern man. Raw masculinity, tempered by reason, virtue, and right action, because nothing of value is earned without sacrifice. Let's begin our apotheosis together. Welcome to another episode of the Growth Through Adversity podcast with your host, Ragnar the Warwolf. What is happening, guys? So today we are going to talk about insulin resistance, or the silent killer, right? It's something that you don't notice, but it's something that a lot of men and women over the age of 35 deal with very frequently. And there's a couple easy ways to detect it, and there's few blood tests that I'm going to give you guys that will absolutely tell you whether you're insulin resistant or not. And the thing about insulin resistance is it's not only going to slow down and inhibit your fat loss, which is just annoying. It's also a precursor to metabolic syndrome and eventually diabetes. So it's something that you want to get ahead of if you've got it, because it's kind of like one of your body's early warning signs that something is metabolically off with you. So what happens when you ignore your metabolic health and things like insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, is that what a lot of guys do is they wait until they're already damaged, right? Until you're 40, 50 years old and you're already insulin resistant and you already have all kinds of problems. You have a ton of visceral fat. And it's something that's been accumulating over time. Your testosterone's been dropping, your belly fat's been increasing. Sometimes libido goes down, blood pressure might creep up. And these are all kind of like warning symptoms of what's to come. And what's to come is ultimately, if you don't get ahead of it and you don't fix it, is probably pre-diabetes and then eventually diabetes and heart disease. And, those two right there, diabetes and heart disease, are still the biggest killers in the West. And they're both pretty like silent killers, is what sucks about them, is that you don't necessarily feel bad. It's not something that's like gonna like really spur you to take action. It's something that's going to creep up on you and creep up on you and creep up on you until something bad happens, right? And so it's something you really want to get ahead of. And the good thing is that your blood work can show you way before it ever becomes a problem, the precursors to metabolic dysfunction. And that's why, like, I am such an advocate of blood work. It's non-negotiable if you're a guy on TRT, but really just anybody, like really everybody. And especially as you get older and older, it's just something you should really stay on top of. I do mine quarterly, biannually is okay too. But and also not just your generic panels that your provider is going to give you, but there's a few more that you can request that a good doctor will happily accommodate, that are just going to give you a deeper snapshot into what's going on with your internal health. So if you understand these and you stay on top of it and you have really good insulin resistance and your body's highly sensitive to insulin, what's going to happen is you're going to feel stable all day. Fat loss is so much easier because the metabolic engine is actually working right. Your testosterone levels are high and you have better just training performance, lower inflammation, and a lower risk for heart disease, right? Because inflammation and heart disease are intimately linked. And again, it's not just about losing weight, which is like a lot of the things that we hear about insulin resistance, but it's about maintaining your overall health and longevity, right? So, and again, if we look at it from a fat loss standpoint, it's really hard to lose fat if there's something wrong with the engine, right? If there's something wrong with the metabolic engine. So let's talk about what is insulin resistance. So insulin is the hormone that moves glucose specifically into your cells for energy, right? So glucose cannot cross the cell wall without being attached to insulin molecules, right? So the two work in tandem. So when you eat a diet rich, a meal heavy in carbohydrates, your body naturally raises your insulin levels. It's not a bad thing. Your body is literally partitioning that nutrient. When everything's healthy, this is not a bad thing. Your body is using insulin to hammer those nutrients into your cells. Vicky, good morning. Is using the insulin to hammer those nutrients into your cells. And what happens when you become resistant to insulin is just like the word says, is your body becomes resistant to the effect of insulin. If you think about it, almost like building up a tolerance to a certain drug if you do too much of it. Obviously, it's more complex than that because it's inside your body, and it's something your body naturally secretes, but it's a very similar function. It takes more and more insulin over time to get the same effect, and your body becomes more and more resistant. Your body secretes more and more insulin, and you kind of get in this runaway effect, right? And what happens is your cells stop responding well. So your body just keeps hammering more insulin, but your blood sugar levels stay elevated because they're not able to exit the bloodstream into the actual cells. So what's super interesting about diabetes is before they understood what it was, before they understood it as a metabolic condition and figured out treatments for it, in the early 1900s, they figured out insulin would fix it. Exogenous insulin would help these people. Before that, they called it the wasting disease because what happened was in the Middle Ages and the early industrial age, people would just get skinnier and skinnier and waste away, and they had these massive appetites, and they were always hungry, and they would eat and they would eat and they would eat. They would just get skinnier and skinnier and skinnier, and eventually they would die. And it was because their body was unable. They became so resistant to insulin that their body was unable to use the glucose that they were eating, and they were just slowly starving. And this really started becoming a problem as our diet became more and more heavily reliant on highly processed sugars and highly processed carbohydrates. So obviously, also in this process, as the blood sugar levels go up, everything becomes kind of dysfunctional. And so we generally see a lot of extra fat storage. And specifically, sometimes we'll see visceral fat storage. So not the subcutaneous fat that's just kind of around your midsection and on top of your muscles under your skin, hence subcutaneous under the skin, but rather the visceral fat that surrounds your organs and is much more dangerous long term. You don't see it, but other than like maybe a big distended gut, even though you don't really have a lot of fat on the outside, you have like, six pack but it's distended. That can be, because there's so much visceral fat wrapped around your organs that can cause all kinds of other stuff. So what happens over time is that we start to develop metabolic syndrome, which is the precursor to diabetes, and then usually cardiovascular disease goes hand in hand with that. And like I said from the beginning of this, most people don't even realize they're on this path. It's just a total surprise. I was on the phone with a guy the other day in a consultation call, and the way he learned he was diabetic is he went to the hospital for something totally unrelated. He had a car accident, and when he was in the hospital for a car accident, they did a normal blood panel, and his A1C was like through the roof. It was like over 10, you know what I mean, which was like potentially fatal. And they're like, holy shit, how do you feel? And they're like, we're not going to let you die in here. And he didn't even know there was anything wrong with him. So and then they started treating him for type 2 diabetes, and now he's very well managed, and he's taking care of himself, and he signed up for a fitness program, and he's eating better, and so now he's at much more manageable levels. But the crazy thing was he was at a basically terminal level of diabetes and didn't even fucking know it. So that's how scary this stuff can be, and that's why the regular blood panels are so crucial. So common symptoms that I constantly see with people struggling with insulin resistance are going to be the belly fat that just will not go away. Like they're doing everything right, they're eating right, they're training hard, their nutrition's dialed in, they're in a caloric deficit, they're sleeping, they're checking all of the boxes, but their belly fat will just not go away no matter what they do. And that can be a really good indicator that something's wrong with the metabolic engine. Doesn't necessarily mean you're insulin resistant. It could also just mean your metabolism has been slowed down from undereating. There's a lot of different causes to it. A lot of these causes are oftentimes related, but it's something that we see very commonly. Also, another red flag is if your energy actually crashes after a meal. If you get like lethargic after a meal, that can be because your body's not able to process the glucose from that meal properly. So it's like just kind of stuck in your bloodstream, and you just don't feel right. You feel kind of weird. And your energy crashes, your energy tanks. That's not normal. If you eat a massive meal, obviously you might be like a little bit lethargic, but it shouldn't be like dramatic and even off after a normal meal. if you're constantly hungry, if you have massive sugar cravings all the time. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean you're insulin resistant. You could just like sugar, but it can be if you have like unhealthy cravings for sugar that are like unstoppable and overwhelming. That can be a red flag that your body's the insulin and glucose, something's not working right with the metabolic engine that drives all of that. Brain fog, poor sleep, low libido, difficulty losing weight when dieting. And the thing about this is these can just be normal symptoms of aging. All of this becomes more difficult as we move through our 40s, 50s, 60s. And that's what a lot of people chalk it up to. They just say, I'm just getting older, shit's just harder. My body doesn't, do everything it used to do. Could very well be the case, or it could be something more sinister that really needs to be addressed, right? Because metabolics, the cool thing about metabolic dysfunction is 9 times out of 10, it is like totally reversible and it is totally repairable, right? But like anything else, the further that it goes, just like gaining weight, if you're 20 pounds overweight, it's much easier to get back to a healthy pound weight than if you're 300 pounds overweight, or 100 pounds overweight. So kind of the same idea with metabolic syndrome is it's something that you can reverse. But the further and further you move away from it and the deeper and deeper and the worse that it gets, the more likely it is that natural remedies aren't going to work as well. And you're going to end up relying on medication, which is what I don't want to see for anybody, because those always come with they come with the benefit of they'll save your life and prevent you from, having all the side effects and stuff that can come with type 2 diabetes. But the downside is they have their own slew of side effects and issues that they're going to cause long term. Um, so a lot of the risk factors that you should watch out for is being overweight. You know what I mean? Having especially a lot of belly fat, a very large waistline, especially relative to your body. High blood pressure can put you at higher risk. High fasting glucose, that's going to be a massive risk factor for you. Higher triglycerides and low HDL cholesterol. So HDL is the good cholesterol, and having an incredibly low number of that being under the norm can increase your risk for insulin resistance. And this is going to dramatically increase the risk of other, secondary and tertiary issues coming from it. So things like heart disease, stroke, and eventually type 2 diabetes. And all of this is incredibly common for people over the age of 35. Like probably for context, probably 75, maybe even 80% of the people we sign up for our program are either insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, or high blood pressure. They have at least one of these conditions, right? The good news is that what we see with people that apply themselves to the program, lose a little bit of weight, tighten up their diet, tighten up their training. Usually within 6 months, they're well within the normal ranges and they're off the medication. Now, obviously, there are outliers and there's extreme cases. So you can't, it's very individual, but those are just kind of the normal metrics that we see. So blood work markers to check, right? So a really good spot to start is just with a standard lipid and comprehensive metabolic panel. That's just what your doctor is going to order for you on your yearly physical. So that's going to give you a lot of like very basic markers of just overall health. That's something that you definitely want in there. A good CBC panel is really good too, to just kind of see how your heart looks and how everything related to your heart looks. But beyond that, and here are some of the specifics. I'm going to give you a couple other ones that they don't typically test for. So fasting glucose will be in your regular CMP or regular comprehensive metabolic panel. And what we're looking for, an ideal range, is in the 80 to 90 range. Um, I would be concerned if it's over 100 consistently. You know what I mean? So obviously, you take this test fasted. If you didn't fast, it might be little bit slewed. Sometimes actually eating can have the reverse effect and lower it and give you an inaccurate reading. So you do want to adhere to the fasting rule and not eat for 12 hours before this test. And we're looking for a number in the 80 to 90s, right? Over 100 is concerning, especially if it happens over and over and over again. So typically they will not do a fasting insulin test with the CMP, but it's something that I request on all of mine. And so fasting insulin ideal is under 8, but what we really want for like functional health, right? What we really want to see is somewhere in the 4 to 6 range. If you're over 10, you're insulin resistant, right? If you're over 10, it's a problem. So high fasting insulin is often the earliest sign of insulin resistance. It's just your body telling you that something's not right with the metabolic engine. So again, we want to be under 8. Under 8 is ideal, but really where like the best, healthiest, you're highly sensitized to insulin is going to be in that 4 to 6 range. All right, so hemoglobin A1C. So this is going to test the A1C. It's going to show an average of your blood sugar over the last 3 months. Really, really important test. It's part of a normal. It's part of a normal CMP. It's something that you'll typically get, but double check that and make sure because it's not. Different doctors do things a little bit different. But definitely want the HA1C test. And what it's going to ideal, it's going to tell you again your blood sugar. It's going to average it out over 3 months. Ideal is below like 5.2, 5.3, but we really want to see it a little bit lower than that. Prediabetes is anything over 5.7. So if you're over 5.7 on your HA1C, and I believe it's 2 or 3 consecutive tests, they're going to say you're pre-diabetic and they're going to start shoving diabetic medication down your throat. It Yeah, you've been there. You
They tried.
They tried, yep. And you're perfect now, right? Just training and nutrition. You went from
Yep.
pre-diabetic to yeah, so see that all the
Yep.
time. Yep.
And my beautiful bride said, I'm not taking any of that crap.
Right. The metformin and all that shit is fucking toxic. I mean, there's a place for it. Like it's better than the alternative, but if you can do it like you did it naturally without it, it's a million times better because there are a ton of side effects with it that the doctors aren't super quick to mention. They just throw those medication at you like they're totally safe, they're well researched. Just shut up and take it. And don't. A lot of doctors don't even advocate like a lifestyle change. They just rely on the medication to fix it, and it's a slippery fucking slope. All right. So lipid panel for heart risk. Again, so a lot of people like we have this narrative of very oversimplified cholesterol is bad. Cholesterol is not bad. What you have to understand is ratios, right? So so let's look at triglycerides first. So triglycerides we want under 100, but ideally much lower than that. So high triglycerides indicate metabolic dysfunction. This is the fatty acids floating around in your bloodstream. If they're super high, it means something isn't right with your metabolism in one way or another, right? Can mean a lot of different things, but it means something is off. It's also going to lead to a lot more inflammation and it's going to lead to a lot more downstream metabolic issues that are going to affect your health and make all of the other stuff way worse. So HDL is your good cholesterol, right? And where we want to see that is somewhere in the 40 to 60 range. 50 to 70 is probably truly ideal. Higher HDL is protective, right? So it has an anti-inflammatory component. It protects your heart. It protects your cardiovascular system. If this is too low, it's a problem. But with that being said, what's more important than HDL just being low or too high or whatever is its ratio to your triglycerides. So if you take your triglycerides number and you get a ratio between that and your HDL, it's going to give you a really good indicator of how healthy your overall cardiovascular system is. And ideal is under 2. Elite metabolic health is going to be under 1. So ratio under 1. A lot of guys that I see that end up in the like zero point 0.8 to 1.2 ratio range, that's where you're going to be the most optimal for fat loss and you're going to be at the lowest risk for heart disease. So that's really what we want to see. And it's just going to give you an indicator that overall your cardiovascular system is not really something that you need to worry about, knock on wood. So total cholesterol, total cholesterol. Ideal at about 180 to 220 is probably an ideal range. So if it's a little bit low, it's not a big deal. Your total cholesterol. But what happens is if our cholesterol is too low, our total cholesterol is too low. So remember that cholesterol is not bad. Hormones are secreted from cholesterol. Literally all of the sex hormones are secreted from are secreted from ultimately cholesterol, including testosterone. So if your cholesterol is too low, it can throw off your hormone production, which is a problem. And that's why a diet that has an ideal amount of healthy fats in it is going to be really effective. So again, some of the risk factors that are going to drive insulin resistance and metabolic disease are going to be being overweight, having a sedentary lifestyle, eating a ton of processed foods. This is probably one of the quickest ways. Even if you are relatively lean, if you're eating a lot of processed fast foods, garbage foods. Your microbiome's fucked up. Lots of inflammation, lots of stuff that you don't want in your body, bad ratios of cholesterol. That's a great way to start to cause insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction if you don't already have it. Poor sleep, chronic stress, excessive alcohol. So, especially on the HDL cholesterol, this is one of the biggest suppressors of your good HDL cholesterol is too much alcohol. And the amount of alcohol that we're saying is too much will actually probably surprise you. Even just a couple of drinks a day can have a super can lower your good cholesterol by somewhere in the 5 to 10 points range. So it can take you from that 40 healthy range down to 30, which is not ideal. And that's just a couple drinks a day. So obviously, I think with alcohol, cycling it is going to be way better than drinking every day. Giving yourself a break, whether it's 3 or 4 days a week where you're not drinking at all, 5 days a week where you're not drinking at all, and then also not binge drinking on those 1 or 2 days that you are drinking if you're going to drink. You know what I mean? Obviously, no alcohol is the best, but like, you know what I mean? I'm not here to be your AA counselor. I'm just telling you the science of what it does to your body. So the best way to balance it, if you want a balanced life that has alcohol in it, is going to be to have at least 4 days a week where you're not putting any alcohol into your body and letting your metabolic engine reset. And then on the days that you do, you're not doing it in excess. So that means you're not, getting fucking slouted and falling asleep in your driveway or anything like that. Obvious, obvious things is going to be a lot better for your long-term health. And then muscle loss. So having a low muscle percentage on your body is also has a negative effect because muscle really regulates insulin resistance, insulin sensitivity, and really helps your body use glucose. Glucose is predominantly used as an energy source in muscle. So if you have insufficient muscle mass, bad fat to muscle ratio, all of this is going to be it's going to be aggravated even further. And that's why strength training is like the best medicine you have for metabolic health overall. It is the quickest way to just reset the engine is just literally to start lifting weights. So the fix, I'm just going to close on this, how you fix it. So if you go and you figure out you have insulin resistance, well, everybody in this Zoom is already doing the right things in that they're working out 3 to 4 days a week. That is your best medicine against it. Exercising specifically with resistance training 3 to 4 days a week, building muscle, adding muscle to your frame so that your body can better utilize glucose and regulate insulin. Eating mostly whole foods doesn't mean you can't leave room for a burger, a pizza, some beer, but like 80%, 85% of your diet should come from wholesome food sources that are unprocessed. That's whole grain carbs, starches, healthy fats, lean proteins. Just pretty much if it comes from an animal or it grows in the earth, it's good to go. And if it doesn't, then it's probably garbage. Controlling your calories. So not overeating grossly is going to be another big one. If you're just, your body's having to process a lot, especially carbs all day, you're eating a lot of meals of like refined sugars, throughout the day, donuts and candy and all the other shit that everybody loves to eat and sugar in your coffee. Your insulin is constantly going up. And anytime your body's experiencing it regularly and regularly and regularly, it's going to become resistant to it. It's going to lose its efficacy on your body, and it's going to start to cause downstream issues. So walking daily, especially after meals, a 15-minute walk after a meal has amazing effects on sensitizing your body to insulin and helping because your muscles are going, there's blood in your muscles, the glucose is traveling to your muscles rather than just sitting there. You're giving your body the signal that you need energy. So that can be massive. And then sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night, and as ironic and kind of vague as this one is, managing stress, compartmentalizing stress, easier said than done, but definitely can be helpful. So again, through consistent discipline, lifestyle change, all of this is fixable. So if you go to the doctor tomorrow and your blood test comes back and says you're insulin resistant or even pre-diabetic, don't panic. Literally, what you do in the next 3 to 4 months is going to determine whether that becomes a permanent state and gets worse and worse and worse, or whether it becomes something that is just, one of those little road bumps with health that we have throughout our life that doesn't plague you long term. So That is all I got, man. The key is that blood work will tell you what happened, will tell you whether you're at risk before the damage happens, before you have that, before you become diabetic, before you have that heart attack, that stroke. Your blood work will tell you a lot of what, what you need to worry about from a health standpoint before it ever happens, and then you can take proactive steps to prevent it. So that is all I got, guys. I'm going to go ahead and open up this conversation here. I'll answer the message in here first. Oh, it's a hey from Chantel. It's not a question. Hey Chantel, back at you. But if anybody has any questions, they can drop them in the chat or unmute themselves and ask them. Again, it doesn't have to be related to what we talked about here. It can be literally related to anything. I'll do my very best to answer it. You trying to unmute? Let me see if I can help you.
I got it.
Yep.
I think I got it.
I can hear you.
Those ranges that you were telling us in the blood tests and all
Yep.
will you post that somewhere, or is that easy to find?
Yeah, so I can.
Because you gave ranges that I see from our nurse or our PA, but
Yeah,
then you kind of fine tuned it a little bit for
totally. Yeah, they
specifics.
won't talk about those ratios and stuff like that. So I'll post that in the Facebook group so you guys have it. I will also post the blood panel that I get that has the name of all the different tests, because if you just go into your doctor, what they'll probably order for you and say I want blood work, they'll probably order a CMP, maybe a CBC and a lipid panel, which is great. That'll give you like a snapshot at the most common issues. But I like to go a little bit more depth in that. Like I said, fasting insulin. There's a few other tests that, kind of how your thyroid functions. So T3, T4, reverse T3. There's a few other blood tests that, if you request them, your doctor will gladly order them, but it's not normal procedure for them to order them. So I'll post that list of the ones that I get quarterly in there. And then I'll give you the normal ranges off of this. I'll make my notes and do a PDF and just post them in there so you guys have them.
Thank you.
Of course.
Hey,
Chantel, what's up?
so, hey, I thought I would add on to the whole like screening labs. So normally, like when we do screening labs, we would do a best thing, always do them fasting because
Yep.
that's what's gonna give you your numbers. And then always ask for your thyroid, especially as a woman. Like you should be checking your thyroid because you never know. And for all the women who are like PCOS, that's and you're not wondering why you're losing weight, you're doing all this great things, but it's probably because you have PCOS. So, which that's where the insulin comes in, the cortisol level, all that lovely stuff. So, honestly, like getting those yearly blood work is always you should be doing no matter what, especially
100%.
being diabetic and all that stuff.
100%. So for context, Chantel is a nurse, so she's given us some good nursing insight there. And 100% right. You've got to request those additional, the thyroid, the fasting insulin. You got to request some of these extra tests because they won't just order them normally, but it's something that you 100% want to know.
Yep.
Cool.
Okay.
Awesome. All right, guys. Vicky,
I've
what's
got one
up?
more. I've got one thing.
Awesome.
Okay, I see a cardiologist, and he's wanting to keep my cholesterol below 190, and I'd have to take a bunch of statin drugs to do that.
Yep.
And I just told him no. I said I'm not going to do that because that stuff makes me feel bad, and it has repercussions on my system. Like
Yeah.
rosuvastatin gave me neuropathy and all that, and so I just said no. I'm not gonna take any more medication because I'm at 205, which I
Yeah.
think is really good for me.
Yep.
It's really good for me because I just naturally run like 240 in the 240s, and I always have my whole life. But now I'm 62, and so they act like that's a problem. I'm just like, well.
Yeah.
But I'm
Those
afraid that if I get it any lower, like it's going to put me at risk for dementia.
Yeah, those statins are notoriously gnarly drugs, and I totally agree with you on trying to avoid them at any cost. And so a good test. So and recently, obviously, so like mainstream medicine still goes by the adage that, you know, if high cholesterol, you know, especially LDL, leads to heart disease, stroke, heart attack, all that good stuff, plaque in the arteries. More and more, we're starting to kind of figure out that there's a synergy between inflammation and cholesterol, right? So it's not just one or the other. You have to have both components. If the arteries are inflamed, they get damaged and the plaque sticks to them. If not, you know, the cholesterol generally moves through the bloodstream pretty smoothly. That's still pretty like a controversial theory, but more and more data is starting to support it. So a good test, you know, if you didn't want to take statins and you wanted to kind of minimize your risk, would be C-reactive protein to see your how much inflammation you have in your cardiovascular system. Because if you have super low inflammation in your cardiovascular system and your cholesterol is just barely out of range, then yeah, I would say taking a statin would probably be a greater risk on your long-term health than having cholesterol that's, you know, 10 or 20 points out of range because you don't have any inflammation. If you had very high inflammation and high cholesterol, then it might be a different conversation. I would probably try to figure out one way to get one of those two things down. But yeah, so that would kind of be my tack there, because I agree with you. Statins are gnarly, and I want to see people off of those
Yeah,
unless
it's
they
poison.
absolutely need them.
It's poison for
Cool.
me anyway.
Yep, I've heard very, very bad things about them from a lot of people. So
Hmm.
Cool.
awesome. Well, if nobody else has any questions, I am going to let you guys go about your business. Thank you guys so much for showing up. I will see you guys next Tuesday.
Thank you, Dr. Warwolf.
I'm
Thank
definitely.
you.
I'm
You
not-
should be a
Dr.
doctor.
Warwolf. That's got a ring to it.
I tell you.
Catch
Y'all have a
you
good
guys
night,
later.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Yep.
Bye.